You rehearse dominance because you have none. You call it confidence, but it is theater. Real strength is silent, selective, and willing to be hated. You are not powerful. You are socially rehearsed. You learned how to speak louder, stand straighter, hold eye contact longer. You call that dominance. It is choreography. It is a costume stitched together from podcasts, gym mirrors, and borrowed quotes. Strength does not rehearse. It does not announce itself. It does not need witnesses. What you display as confidence is often fear of exclusion. You are terrified of being dismissed, so you perform intensity. You're afraid of being ignored, so you manufacture presence. The herd taught you that visibility equals value. It lied. Here is the lens shift. Most men are not weak because they lack muscles or money. They are weak because their identity is externally regulated. Their nervous system is tuned to approval. Their decisions are filtered through perception management. They optimize for applause, not outcome. That is not power. That is dependency with better branding. Nietzsche described this fracture through the concept of slave morality. The herd cannot dominate physically, so it dominates through consensus, through shame, through moral narratives. Over time, men internalize this system. They begin to measure themselves by how acceptable they are, not how sovereign they are. You have likely done the same. You learned to appear assertive, but not threatening. Ambitious, but not arrogant. Strong, but not disruptive. You trimmed your edge so you could remain digestible. You turned yourself into a socially approved version of danger, a declawed predator. That is the mask. The mask says, be confident, but do not unsettle anyone. The mask says, be dominant, but remain liked. The mask says, be powerful, but never become inconvenient. Real power violates comfort. It destabilizes. It creates asymmetry. You were trained to fear that. From childhood, compliance was rewarded. Questioning was punished. Aggression was labeled toxic. Intensity was pathologized. Over time, you split yourself. The raw impulse to dominate, build, conquer, and the socially acceptable persona that learned to smile and nod. The persona won. Now you perform strength because you cannot afford to embody it. Embodiment risks rejection. Embodiment risks isolation. Embodiment risks being called dangerous, and you would rather be safe than sovereign. This is the identity reassignment protocol. First, you must label yourself correctly. Not as alpha, not as leader, not as high value. Those are marketing terms. You are a performer until proven otherwise. A man who calibrates his behavior based on audience feedback. A man who scans faces mid-sentence to measure impact. A man who adjusts tone to maintain harmony. Do not flinch from that label. Accept it. Precision precedes power. Second, you must understand the cost. The performer never commands fear. At best, he commands temporary attention. Fear arises from unpredictability and consequence. The performer avoids both. He wants to be understood. He wants to be agreed with. He wants to be safe. The sovereign does not care to be understood. He cares to be effective. There's a difference between being respected and being approved. Respect contains distance. Approval contains control. When others approve of you, they feel entitled to you. When they respect you, they calculate around you. Right now, most people do not calculate around you. They assume compliance. They assume negotiation. They assume accessibility. That assumption is the evidence of your weakness. I will show you in the next chapter how weakness constructs moral arguments to justify itself, how insecurity forms alliances, how resentment becomes ideology. But before that, you must detach from the herd lens. Stop asking, do they like me? Start asking, do they adjust around me? Stop asking, am I impressive? Start asking, am I consequential? Strength is not volume, it is leverage. If this realization stings, good. Shame is the first crack in the mask. Anger follows, then defiance, then pride, then sovereignty. If you feel defensive, turn this off. The mask will protect you. If you feel exposed, continue. You are beginning to see the architecture of your cage. Incapable, it says, I am morally incapable. It says, I am morally superior. It does not admit fear. It reframes fear as goodness. This is the engine Nietzsche dissected with surgical precision, the inversion where impotence becomes virtue and strength becomes sin. Understand this mechanism or remain owned by it. When a man cannot dominate physically, strategically, or intellectually, he cannot compete on the battlefield of force. So he moves the battlefield. He introduces morality as a weapon. He redefines aggression as evil. He labels ambition as greed. He brands intensity as toxicity. Now the strong must defend themselves. The weak become judges. This is not philosophy. It is strategy. The slave morality engine runs on 3 fuels: resentment, comparison, narrative control. Resentment begins in comparison. A weaker man observes a stronger one, more decisive, more feared, more independent. Instead of building strength, he builds a story. He is arrogant. He is insecure. He is compensating. The story protects the ego. Comparison creates discomfort. Resentment transforms discomfort into accusation. Narrative control spreads accusation into culture. Soon, strength must apologize for existing. You have participated in this engine. Every time you downplayed your ambition so others would not feel threatened. Every time you criticized someone's boldness because it unsettled you. Every time you said, I do not care about power, when in reality, you feared failing to obtain it. That is weakness rebranding itself as virtue. The herd rewards this behavior. It praises humility. It glorifies harmlessness. It celebrates the man who is safe, predictable, accommodating. The man who never destabilizes a room. The man who never forces recalibration. Why? Because he is controllable. A controllable man can be positioned, managed, pacified. He does not command fear because he avoids consequences. He does not impose standards because he seeks inclusion. This is the emotional pressure point. You want to be seen as good. You want to be accepted as decent. You want to believe that your restraint is maturity. But often your restraint is fear of backlash. Your politeness is fear of confrontation. Your humility is fear of exposure. The engine whispers, stay small. It is noble. But noble men build empires. They do not apologize for their will. Here is the hidden truth. The herd does not hate dominance. It hates dominance it cannot access. If a powerful man includes them, they celebrate him. If he excludes them, they moralize against him. Inclusion buys loyalty. Exclusion triggers ideology. You must see how this dynamic manipulates your behavior. You soften your edges to avoid becoming a target. You dilute your speech to avoid being labeled arrogant. You hesitate to enforce boundaries because you fear being called cold. That hesitation is the leash. I will show you in the next chapter the archetypes that operate inside this system. The performer who submits to it, the predator who exploits it, the sovereign who transcends it. But before we move, internalize this. Morality in weak hands becomes a cage for the strong. If you constantly justify your ambition, you are already negotiating your throne. If you require moral approval to act, you are not sovereign. You are licensed. and licenses can be revoked. The emotional sequence must complete. Shame that you have been governed by consensus, anger that you allowed it, defiance against the narrative, pride in reclaiming your will. Fear is not commanded by a man who seeks permission. If this challenges your self-image, good. Identity must fracture before it reforms. Next, we dissect the hierarchy of men inside this engine. You will recognize yourself in one of them. You may not like what you see. Hierarchy is not theoretical. It is behavioral. Inside every room, every industry, every alliance, men sort themselves into roles. Not by title, by nervous system, by appetite, by tolerance for isolation. There are three archetypes operating in the slave morality engine: the performer, the predator, the sovereign. You are one of them. First, the performer. The performer studies power but never embodies it. He copies cadence, posture, vocabulary. He upgrades aesthetics, better clothes, sharper tone, controlled eye contact. He looks decisive. He sounds assertive. But watch closely. He constantly scans for feedback, micro-adjustments. Smile softens when tension rises. Voice drops when challenged. Humor inserted to diffuse discomfort. He is calibrated to maintain social equilibrium. The performer's core fear is exclusion. He wants status without risk, authority without backlash, influence without isolation. So he performs fragments of dominance while remaining emotionally available to the group. He does not command fear. He negotiates perception. The tragedy. The performer often believes he is evolving. He consumes philosophy. He quotes Nietzsche. He talks about sovereignty. But when real friction appears, he retreats to likability. That is you, if your boldness disappears when stakes rise. Second, the predator. The predator understands weakness intimately because he has it. But instead of hiding inside morality, he weaponizes perception. He detects insecurity in others. He exploits hesitation. He dominates the timid. Predators thrive in systems filled with performers. They interrupt. They escalate. They push boundaries slightly past comfort. They create uncertainty, not because they are sovereign, but because they enjoy imbalance. They command fear, but not respect. Fear without structure becomes chaos. The predator's core drive is control. He does not seek approval, but he also lacks higher vision. He wants advantage, not architecture. He feeds on weaker men to feel powerful. Predators rise fast in disorganized environments. They collapse in the presence of true sovereigns. Third, the sovereign. Rare, quiet, economical. The sovereign does not perform dominance. He embodies consequence. His words are minimal because he does not need to convince. He speaks as an architect, not a supplicant. Silence around him feels heavy. He does not react to provocation. He assesses. He does not chase validation. He builds leverage. He does not broadcast strength. He calibrates it. Here is the distinction that matters. The performer asks, "How am I perceived?" The predator asks, "How can I control?" The sovereign asks, "What must be built?" Different operating systems. The sovereign commands fear indirectly, not through aggression, through unpredictability and standards. He enforces boundaries without explanation. He withdraws access without drama. He rewards selectively. People calculate around him because consequences are real. You cannot fake this archetype. It requires internal detachment from approval and immunity to isolation. Most men fail here. They crave audience, they crave recognition, they crave reassurance. The sovereign can stand alone. Now ask yourself precisely, When challenged publicly, do you escalate emotionally or reduce tension? Performer. When you sense weakness, do you press harder to feel superior? Predator. When you encounter disrespect, do you respond minimally and adjust structure instead of arguing? Sovereign. Be honest. Precision over ego. Most of you oscillate between performer and predator. Harmless in public, aggressive in safe zones. You posture online and soften offline. You criticize strong men privately, but avoid confrontation directly. That fragmentation is weakness. I will show you in the next chapter how history punishes harmlessness, how empires collapse when performers dominate leadership, how predators temporarily seize control, and how sovereigns reshape order through calibrated fear. But first, understand this gate. If you are satisfied being liked, remain performer. If you crave domination without responsibility, become predator. If you are prepared for isolation, choose sovereign. The throne is not won by volume. It is secured by consequence. History does not reward harmless men. It erases them. Civilizations do not fall because enemies are strong. They fall because leaders become performers. They begin managing perception instead of managing consequence. They prioritize stability optics over structural dominance. That is how rot spreads. When strength becomes aesthetic, collapse begins. Look at declining empires. Late-stage Rome did not lack soldiers. It lacked virtue. Discipline softened. Standards diluted. Leadership feared backlash more than invasion. Decisions were filtered through popularity, not preservation. Harmlessness masqueraded as civility. The same pattern repeats across institutions, corporations, dynasties. When leaders focus on being liked rather than feared, enforcement weakens. Boundaries blur. Predators test limits. They push further each time because nothing happens. Consequence evaporates. Fear, when calibrated, stabilizes systems. It creates psychological gravity. Without it, everything floats into chaos. You were taught that being feared is immoral, that it signals insecurity, that it means you are compensating. That narrative was written by those who could not command it. Understand this clearly. Fear is not screaming. Fear is not cruelty. Fear is not volatility. Fear is predictable consequence. When a sovereign enforces a boundary, once and without emotion, memory forms. People adjust permanently. When a performer negotiates every boundary, memory dissolves. People test again. You are being tested constantly. In meetings, in relationships, in negotiations, micro-challenges, subtle disrespect, late replies, missed commitments, tone shifts. These are probes. If nothing happens, the hierarchy updates. Predators study this carefully. They escalate slowly. First interruption, then dismissal, then public contradiction. Each step measures resistance. If you soften, you are catalogued as harmless. Harmless men are used. Consider war as metaphor. A nation that signals unwillingness to retaliate invites invasion. Not because enemies are evil, because incentives align. Risk is low, reward is high. Human dynamics operate the same way. If your presence does not alter behavior, you are ornamental. If your silence does not carry weight, you are background. If your absence is not felt as loss, you are replaceable. This is not cruelty, it is structure. Now escalate internally. Imagine two leaders. One explains every decision to maintain harmony. The other states decisions calmly and executes. When challenged, he does not argue. He restructures access. Who commands more fear? Who commands more respect? The one who detaches from approval. Fear is an atmospheric effect. It forms when three elements align: scarcity of access, unpredictability of response, certainty of consequence. Remove one, fear weakens. Remove all, you become entertainment. Many men prefer to be entertaining. They joke, they over-explain, they soften language, they dilute intensity. They believe this builds rapport. It builds familiarity. Familiarity erodes gravity. Gravity commands fear. I will show you in the next chapter how to engineer this gravitational field deliberately, not through aggression, through architecture, through silence, through standards that do not bend under social pressure, but absorb this warning. If you continue optimizing for comfort, your influence will plateau. Your relationships will lack edge. Your authority will remain negotiable. History punishes the harmless by forgetting them. You can either become a stabilizing force that others calculate around, or remain a well-liked spectator in arenas built by stronger men. If you are uncomfortable, good. Discomfort signals the collapse of illusion. Next, we construct the protocol: tactical, cold, precise. Power is not volume, it is calibration. You do not command fear by shouting. You command fear by removing certainty, by controlling access, by enforcing consequence once and without emotion. This chapter is tactical, no philosophy, architecture. The command presence framework is built on 4 pillars: scarcity, silence, unpredictability, outcome, detachment. First, the scarcity lever. Access creates entitlement. Scarcity creates value. If you are always available, always responsive, always explaining, you erode gravity. You train others to expect you. Expectation kills fear. Scarcity does not mean disappearing emotionally. It means controlled access, delayed responses when unnecessary, selective engagement, refusal to over-clarify. When your time feels limited, people measure their words. When your presence feels rare, behavior sharpens. The performer floods rooms with energy. The sovereign enters and alters oxygen levels. Practice this. Speak less than required. End conversations first. Decline invitations without apology, not rudely, cleanly. Every clean refusal strengthens the scarcity lever. Second, the silence blade. Most men expose themselves through over-explanation. They defend decisions before being attacked. They justify standards before enforcement. Silence is a blade. When challenged, do not rush to clarify. Pause. Hold eye contact. Let tension mature. The human nervous system hates uncertainty. In that space, hierarchy forms. If you answer immediately, you relieve pressure. If you allow silence to linger, others adjust downward. This is not manipulation. It is control of tempo. In negotiations, silence extracts concessions. In arguments, silence destabilizes attackers. In leadership, silence amplifies authority. The key: silence must be intentional, not awkward. Stillness, breathing steady, no nervous gestures. That is discipline. Third, the unpredictability principle. Predictable men are safe. Safe men are managed. If your reactions are consistent and emotional, you are mapped quickly. If you sometimes reward and sometimes withdraw, based strictly on standards, people pay attention. Unpredictability does not mean chaos. It means non-linear response. For example, minor disrespect receives zero emotional reaction, but triggers structural adjustment later. Access reduced, opportunity removed, promotion delayed, no drama, just consequence. When behavior meets outcome without warning, fear crystallizes. You must detach from the desire to be understood in the moment. Fourth, the outcome detachment principle. This is the spine. If you fear losing the deal, the relationship, the friendship, you negotiate your standards. That negotiation signals weakness instantly. The sovereign is willing to lose, willing to walk away mid-sentence, willing to terminate alliance, willing to close the door permanently, not impulsively, strategically. When others sense that you are not desperate for continuation, power shifts. Desperation dissolves fear. Detachment generates it. Now integrate these pillars. Scarcity limits access. Silence controls tempo. Unpredictability enforces attention. Outcome, detachment protects standards. Together they form command presence. But there is a warning. If you apply these tactics without internal shift, you become predator, calculating, cold, hollow. People will sense insecurity behind the technique. Technique without identity is fragile. That is why the next chapter matters. Identity death, the ghost phase. Before we move, evaluate yourself clinically. Do you over-explain? Do you rush to respond? Do you fear awkward silence? Do you hesitate to walk away? Each yes is a leak in your authority. Fix the leaks. I will show you how to dismantle the performer identity entirely, how to withdraw from validation loops, how to prune social excess, how to re-emerge as sovereign without theatrics. If you are afraid of losing people, turn this off. This next phase requires isolation tolerance. Before sovereignty, there is erasure. You cannot layer strength on top of neediness. You cannot architect power while addicted to validation. The performer identity must die, not cosmetically, structurally. This is the ghost phase. The ghost phase is not depression. It is not withdrawal from life. It is strategic reduction. You remove excess exposure. You cut unnecessary speech. You detach from applause cycles. You become less visible while becoming more deliberate. Most men fear this phase because it feels like loss. Loss of attention, loss of reassurance, loss of constant stimulation. Good. You are overstimulated by approval. Every notification, every compliment, every agreement fed the performer. You built identity through reaction. Without reaction, you feel invisible. Invisibility is the forge. During the ghost phase, you stop broadcasting intent. You stop announcing goals. You stop explaining transformations. You move quietly, build privately, enforce internally. This creates psychological pressure in your environment. People begin to wonder, to speculate, to recalibrate. Where did he go? Why is he not reacting? Why does he feel different? Mystery replaces familiarity. Familiarity breeds dismissal. Mystery breeds calculation. The first protocol inside the ghost phase is social pruning. Audit your circle clinically. Who consumes your energy without elevating structure? Who expects constant access? Who challenges you playfully because you trained them to? Reduce exposure. Shorter conversations. Fewer disclosures. Less emotional availability. Do not announce the shift. Announcing it is performer behavior. Second protocol, emotional coldness, not cruelty, control. When provoked, no spike. When praised, no inflation. Emotional neutrality unsettles others because it removes leverage. If they cannot excite you or disturb you, they lose handles. Handles are control points. Remove them. Third protocol, selective speech. Speak only when value increases. If your words do not advance structure, remain silent. This forces others to fill space. It increases the weight of your contributions. Over time, people will wait for you to speak. That waiting is gravity forming. Fourth protocol, strategic invisibility. You stop attending every arena. You decline low-value environments. You remove yourself from debates that do not serve architecture. Absence is data. When you withdraw from noise, Your presence becomes premium. But understand the emotional sequence. First comes shame. You realize how much of your personality was performance. Then anger. You resent the years spent optimizing for approval. Then defiance. You begin enforcing boundaries without apology. Then pride. You notice behavioral shifts in others. Tone changes. Caution appears. Finally, sovereignty. You no longer crave reaction. You measure by outcome. This phase is isolating. Some will call you distant. Others will call you arrogant. A few will attempt to provoke the old version of you to reappear. Do not comply. The performer seeks reconciliation. The sovereign tolerates misunderstanding. Here is the critical shift. During the ghost phase, you redirect attention inward. Skill acquisition, physical discipline, strategic thinking, financial leverage. You build pillars that do not depend on audience validation. Strength becomes functional, not aesthetic. When you re-emerge, you will not need to announce dominance. It will be assumed because your responses are slower. Your standards are firmer. Your exits are cleaner. You will notice something subtle. Conversations shorten on around you. Jokes at your expense disappear. Negotiations become more respectful. That is commanded fear. Not because you threatened anyone, because you demonstrated that access to you is conditional. Conditional access equals hierarchy. Most men never complete this phase. They retreat midway because loneliness feels like weakness. They rush back to the herd to feel warm again. Warmth is comfort. Comfort is vulnerability. Vulnerability is leverage. You must be able to stand alone without craving applause. That is the birth of virtue. In the final chapter, I will issue the warning. Power isolates. Fear attracts resistance. Sovereignty demands sacrifice. If you are still here, you are either curious or committed. The next filter will reveal which. You wanted sovereignty. Now understand the cost. Power isolates. Not because others reject you, because you reject dependency. The moment you stop negotiating your standards for inclusion, the circle shrinks. The applause fades. The noise quiets. Silence expands. Most men turn back here. They mistake isolation for failure. They interpret reduced access as social loss. They panic when fewer people reach out. That panic exposes unfinished detachment. Virtue is not talent. It is sustained will under resistance. Nietzsche did not glorify comfort. He respected the man who could endure solitude without dissolving into resentment. If you command fear correctly, you will attract friction. Weak men will moralize you. They will call you cold, arrogant, intimidating, unapproachable. These are not insults. They are signals that your presence disrupts comfort. Predators will test you. They will escalate subtly, probe boundaries, attempt dominance displays. They are measuring consequence. You must respond without emotion and without explanation. One correction, one enforcement, then structural adjustment. No speeches, no debates. The sovereign does not defend identity. He enforces structure. Here is the final warning. If you secretly crave to be universally liked, stop now. Fear and universal approval cannot coexist. If you need constant reassurance, this path will starve you. If you require emotional warmth from every room, you will betray your standards the moment pressure rises. The throne is not crowded because most men prefer comfort over consequence. You have two options. Return to performance. Re-engage the herd. Polish your persona. Chase validation disguised as networking. Speak loudly about power while avoiding decisions that cost you socially. Or commit fully. Maintain scarcity. Wield silence. Enforce unpredictable consequence. Remain detached from outcome. Continue the ghost discipline even when loneliness whispers. Over time, something shifts. You stop seeking permission. You stop explaining standards. You stop fearing loss. Loss becomes filtration. Rejection becomes sorting. Resistance becomes proof of gravity. And then, fear stabilizes around you. Not terror, not chaos, controlled distance. People measure their tone. They think before challenging. They prepare before approaching. That is commanded fear. Not because you are loud, because you are sovereign. Remember this clearly. Strength that needs witnesses is performance. Strength that alters behavior without announcement is power. If you are scared, turn this off and return to comfort. If you are ready to be misunderstood, step forward. There is no applause at the top, only altitude.